Okay,
Yeah.
there you go. You see
Yep.
that?
So,
You can see that lessons learned, right?
yep. And then if you hit PowerPoint, that'll take over. As long as PowerPoint launches on this monitor, you're good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll just use one monitor rather than several here.
Yeah.
Well,
Sorry
the
about
only
that.
problem is I don't have any notes here. Like what's
You just gotta wing it.
I'm wing it. That's okay. All right.
Yeah. Just maximize that. You're good to go.
Okay. There we go. Sorry about that, guys.
Awesome.
That's great.
All right. Well, first of all, this lessons learned installing Client macOS is kind of a weird topic here, and it's really more than that. I think I'm using that point of Client macOS as really kind of a state of what's going on, and just basically this is more of an experience report in terms of what I've learned from it, rather than having scripts that you can actually use, right? So I don't recommend you go out and run this stuff on your machine at this point, because I haven't fully vetted it with everyone. So okay, just given with that, so just like you got those disclaimers, right? That says it doesn't mess you up. But what happened is that we as a performance people have oftentimes a tough time getting the attention of developers, right? I've had several times I've had developers wouldn't give me the time of day, but yet when we have his program blows up, right? Can't handle anything. Then in meetings he would say, "Hey Wilson, you're the expert on this program. Tell us about the performance issues here," right? I mean, how many times have you guys seen that? Right. So what I've learned is that if I can get in early and help the team establish these tools, and with this particular developer I had, he came to my desk once, "Hey, can I borrow your laptop?" I just went, "No," but what I can do is help you set it up. And I just so happen to have this thing that I did really for myself, because there are so many different applications today. I mean, I'm count here about 50 different ones that I've had to use at one time or another. And if you read through this, you can tell that there's a lot of them in there, right? That you actually use on a day-to-day basis. But on some customers, some projects and not others and so forth, that I've been using. So over the last year or so, I've taken it upon myself to create installation scripts for every one of these things that I work on. So that way when I get a new laptop, I can just run this, and over lunch, everything will be downloaded. It's if I have, enough bandwidth and it doesn't crap on me, right? So I found that very helpful. And that was the way for me to have gained some support from this developer. And ever since after that, the guy was like beholden to me, right? Because I literally saved his butt. And so that's really the experience report. And what I wanted to mention here is that it is not so much about building scripts. It's about helping people in order for us to get into their good graces of this. And there are many of these applications that we have. And I think part of the difficulty that we have as technologists of any kind is picking our battles, right? I mean, are we going to do Java? Are we going to do Kotlin here? I mean, every time I turn around, and read Wired or look at Reddit, there's some new thing that comes up that supposedly be the greatest thing, right? And then a few months later, it just doesn't happen. And the latest darling is like Google's Flutter here. I don't know what really the big deal is, but it's just a different coding style. And the same thing with Kotlin, right? That's came up. And so the question is, how are we going to performance test these things when we don't know anything really about it? And I think part of the answer is getting in league, getting people who know, developers or operations people, to work with us. And part of it is just getting them to beholden to us. And that's basically my strategy, and it's worked a little bit, well for me. Now, one of the things I wanted to mention here is that this came from Mary Meeker's presentation last week from Kleiner Perkins. It was one of the top, what are called VCs, in the country. And, everybody anticipates her analysis. And one thing that you can see here is that the higher the bar here, the longer it takes for 25% adoption. Dishwashers took, over 75 years. But if you notice here, like for example, today's Worldwide Developer Conference in Apple, they said the app, Apple's App Store, the App Store, which really basically catapulted Apple into megabucks and got them to be the largest company in the entire world now. And that was the App Store, right? That's how they got money, as well as all these other things. But that was 10 years old, right? 10 years ago, with the advent of the mobile phone and the internet, if you look at this trend line, and it's really the most scary thing I've ever seen on this, is that the asymptote, or the singularity, it's really going on, and things are changing faster and faster, and to the point where everything's going to change all at once, right? It's what they call the technical singularity. And that's coming, right? And it's coming sooner than we think, right? Before, I guess, we all retire. So anyways, the hot topics today are AI, machine learning, augmented reality, autonomous vehicles. There's a deluge of things that are going on to us. But the one thing that I wanted to mention here of us as performance people, and what I'm trying to do here, is that my recognition is that the AI capabilities have raised expectations for all other software, to the point, I think, where automated tuning is now an expected feature. Now, I won't go into the whole technical thing about this, but there's a new thing called the Amazon SageMaker. So here's a quiz from the previous one, from a previous session. What is this here? It's a distributed network, right? So what this is that they would be able to tune the settings, so these different things here. And that's what really led me, I think, once to creating that little automation of mine to install the Mac, and then I'm going to do the same thing with servers as well, to the point where we can have a way of tuning, like the JVM settings, tuning the different aspects, how many different how much memory to allocate among the different aspects of the computer, or different sizes of machines. And that's a huge issue for us, because the tests that I've done, I found that a series of small machines is actually better in terms of cost per transaction, is actually less than large ones, that you have to pay more for. And largely, I think it's because of the internet connection, or the network connections, is that sometimes we flatten out the amount of network on these very, very large machines that we have within Azure. And that's the reason why I recommend a lot of people to go into Google servers, because they have the fastest network connections between the machines. And I've seen actually other people, like for example, Nginx, they published this situation where the smaller machines actually perform faster, and they topped out on the Amazon servers, how much transactions could be done. So that's a huge thing. And so one of the things that we want to be careful of is really looking at the network saturation, especially when we work with these large machines. So anyways, the whole issue, I think, with us is what the next generation of performance engineers would be to figure out a way of fine-tuning this, so that way it's self-tuning, where we identify the optimal situation among the different clouds, multi-cloud, instantaneously for us to work with. And that's the big challenge that I'm looking to do. The other aspect of it, that in terms of our performance people, or that challenge that we have, I think, is in the cognitive realm. And I don't know, it's just like Microsoft uses that as a thing. But the one thing I think that we need to be careful of, or that we performance people need to be cognizant of, is one of the big changes that we have. And I just got this little button here. I don't know if you guys can see this little ATE button here, for AT&T, the LTE-M, which is a cellular situation. So with the cellular, internet, we're outside of what we usually test for. In the cellular, we don't have a way of really testing the towers and so forth. So I think that's going to be, quite an issue for us, especially when they get into this IoT. And I have a feeling that I think these cellular buttons and IoTs are going to be important, or sell as well as many of these other machines out there, because you don't have to worry about the network situation. Because part of the problem that we have with these little box, the Echo and and so forth, is that they require Wi-Fi constant on connection. And in an office, like one time I tried to plug in one of my Raspberry Pis, and I realized that I had two choices basically. One is a Wi-Fi connection that only lasts for a day. If the company was smart, they would only allow a guest Wi-Fi a day's access, and they would cut them off automatically. And then the other option is for me to have full time, where I'm logged in all the time, but I would be putting in my password, have a type of account in my Wi-Fi for IoT devices that should be considered a rogue situation all the time. So because of that, I think that's why cellular is going to be a huge situation for IoT in the future. The other one that I think that we have is this kind of thing, and that came out just last month. In fact, it's not available until 22nd of this month. This Amazon Deep Lens that we have, and the challenge that we have for us as performance people is that they are doing this artificial intelligence, computer vision, so forth. And as you know, the way that we look at or we generate machine learning is vastly different than the programming where we have. And so basically what I say is you can't bring a accounting system to a AI or machine learning fight. And because it's not ever going to be 100%, it's not like a double entry bookkeeping where every cent is accounted for. That's not the way. It's very probabilistic, where 90% is considered great, right? And as long as it's better than humans, that's all they really care about, I think, in terms of the strategy, as long as it beat the best humans around. And that's been the case with surgeons doing X-ray reading and so forth. So there's still a chance to work with this. And so I think that that's going to be an issue for us in performance people, is that the accuracy expectation is not really that great. It's going to be lower than what we'd expected. We can't have a situation that we predefined and says, okay, this is what's going to happen. It's going to be difficult to do that on AI. In fact, we probably don't want to do that because it's just not able to do it. Okay. The other issue I think that we're running into would be this cloud serverless. And when we have a serverless application, there's simply no need for performance people, right? You would think. But I think there's still a need, even though people don't think there may be, because the serverless, as you guys know, runs completely on Amazon's cloud. It runs, developers be writing Amazon Lambda, they would write Azure Functions or Google Actions. But there are some people like Iron.io, for example, they have an on-prem solution for serverless code. In fact, there is a serverless framework that you can use to write your serverless code that will work on Lambda on Amazon, that will work on Azure, Google, and Iron.io. So that way you can, have this multi-platform. And if you were going to go write serverless code, that's what I would recommend, is to use the serverless framework, or there's another one, I forget what the name is, that would give you multi-platform. And I think that's really the issue for us, is that for us to, one of the things that we can contribute as performance engineers to say, okay, what is the benefit of running on Amazon versus Azure and Google? So that way, when we run a test, we could say, hey, you can do it cheaper per transactions on Azure in the morning, and you can do it cheaper in the Google at night, or when it's light, or whatever, how that may go. So that way you can have a multiple different allocations. And I think that's really the future for us. And our ability to provide statistics around this is really where we would still continue to add value, even though all of the servers are sitting in Amazon and, really away from our situation. But what we can do is really become data scientists, so to speak, around all of these processing. So I think our role, if we look at our role difference, would be that we would go into data science rather than just purely figuring out whether capacity is there. So I think that's really a key thing for us, and that's what the direction I've been going to, is to kind of get myself into a DevOps role, a data science role, so that way I can be more helpful in this new age of all this stuff going on. Okay. So now there's a whole lot of these ecosystems, and every application, every new thing has a whole ecosystem of hardware, operating servers, installers, utilities, and as well as the programming stuff and frameworks, and then, different processes and, training examples. So, I haven't had the time to really do this programming, and that really wasn't my interest, because, my original thing to getting into performance was that it was the most difficult part. It was more difficult than me, creating forms and programming or coding to this. So that's how I got into it, and I still think that that's the case. So my thing has been gravitating into these ancillary aspects of it, which I think has greater challenges than even just figuring out what library to have. So sorry about this whole speaking. Okay, hold on to this. Now, with the data processing, we have already leveraged. We can leverage our capabilities, our experience in data processing, and we already have this statistical capability, right? And so what we need to do is to add machine learning, and we would really be able to come in as a data scientist. I don't know if you guys all realize that, but that's what somebody told me the other day when the recruiter called us, going, yeah, you're probably more qualified to be a data scientist than many of our people, because you have this trifecta or this triple threat capability that a lot of people don't have. But the only thing missing would be maybe just understanding of these new machine learning or the mathematical aspects of it, that part of mathematics that we've already have in there. So keep that in mind. I mean, it's this whole new world of machine learning and AI. I think that we are very much capable of working effectively in that whole realm. Okay. Now, by the way, in my blog, I have if you have iOS and or Android, I put in my little these QR codes in a presentation. I don't know if it's going to be that useful for anyone, but I thought it'd be fun. So you can see this. If you see this on my presentation later on, I put in these little QR codes in there, and if you have your iPhone or whatever, you can then take a picture of that, and then that will direct you to specific URLs that I'm showing on the screen. So of course, this will be on your iPhone or your iPad or whatever. Then you could see that, but follow along with me that way. Okay. Now, one of the things I mentioned is that this one pro tip here is that we want to include time to agree on and establish team tool sets. And if you remember back in what I was presenting earlier with this, this one here, what I'll do is put together this item just going, okay, you want virtual environment, you've got, whatever else. I can put this whole list in there and it says, okay, team, this is what we want to use, right? So by doing that, then you get some level of mutual accountability and a mutual support to say that, okay, this is what we have and this is what we've decided to do, and we're going to help each other learn these tools. So I think that that's an important part of getting this, because I can't begin to tell you how many teams struggle with this tool set right there when they're trying to figure out how to do code. So my suggestion is, if I were king, is to allocate time to establish these tool sets. When they go and try to have a problem, you try to fix problems, it's they would figure out what these features are and test them before it's needed. It's kind of like a team building thing, so to speak. That would be one pro tip that I have. The other one is that as they operate, as they go in and code the next generation, before they do that, upgrade the tooling before each iteration. And with a efficient way of upgrading this tool, then they would have an easier time getting into the next. So basically, what I'm saying is the tooling needs to be iterated as much as the tool. So basically, you would have another file that would have something else in it, if they want to change to a different tool. Okay? Because I see that all the time with these developers, is that, oh yeah, this we're going Angular we don't like, and so we're going to go to React, and then a few months later they go, oh no, this Vue would be better for us, so they go and completely redo. So you want to identify this and figure out when to do. So when they go in and do their blue-green deployments, it is with the understanding of this setup. So my suggestion is the setup for all of this, even the clients as well as the servers, that all goes into the shift in blue-green deployment as we go. So it should be going into the GitHub or GitLab, I should say, now that Microsoft bought them. Right? So anyway, my approach has been, to ingratiate myself with the developers. In the past, it's been 4 years already. Time has gone by so fast. I started out in, Star East, Star West. I said, okay, I want to do hands-on training. And so I picked this Git and GitHub because this, by the way, is from Xebia Labs, which is basically this distillation of all the different tools that were DevOps tools that's out there. And so basically I did start it with that, and that's really earned me a lot of points with developers because now I took my time and now I can do a training to do that. So I'm still going to continue doing that. 6 months, Disneyland, Disney World, that's what I've been doing. But the next time, I think what we're going to do is to work with the cloud environments, as well, AWS, AZ, and the Google Cloud Platform as well. But one constant with all of these is Bash scripts. And, a lot of people, don't even consider Bash a programming language. But, I think that is a huge thing. I think that if there's one thing you want to start is not just, Go or whatever, but make sure that you know how to work with this. So that way, like I said, coming back to this, is that you want to be, part of the team by doing this whole aspect. So that way, you get to be part of their communication process rather than just, coming in at the end and then, trying to be an expert at it, with no information at all. So I think this idea of having being embedded inside the team is a good one, but I think that this is a good structure for us to figure out how do you provide value to the team throughout the entire process, throughout the entire life cycle of their aspects. So with the cloud environment, one of the things I wanted to mention is that there is a QuickLab one out there that will train you on how to use this. So that way you can they give you an actual lab environment for 3 hours and 22 minutes here at a time. And you buy these credits. I think they're like $5 or $10 a piece. I forget, but you get some free credits depending on, there's some schemes you can get free credit, or you can get $59 a month. You can have access to these labs forever. Not forever, but for as long as you need it, right? Or 24 hours, I should say, at a time, until you run out of money, right? So, but anyway, so the way they have it is these quests, and you have labs. And one of the things you need to do, by the way, is that you would look at the lab details, and what you do is you sign up for a quest, and then when you do that, then you can take these little badges that they give you. Okay, these little badges on here. You take those badges and you can put those on your LinkedIn or your resume and say that you've gone through them. And the way that they work is that you would have, they would give you this information step by step on how to do things, right? And a lot of times it's, click here, click there, manual. But oftentimes they would also have, the CLI that you would use as well. But the pro tips that I have in this area is that first, you get data and scripts. You put that outside of the cloud being used. So basically what I do is, I have a GitHub account, and when I go into start up a new EC2 instance or, on different machines, I would just copy and paste it, and it would download my script into the EC2 instance. So that way I can go and flip around multiple clouds. I can flip around between Google and Amazon or Azure if I want to, or other people can work with me and create the script and run the script in their instance without it. So my recommendation is, try not to use like this, where you would basically have this, sitting in a particular cloud. I would have the scripts outside on a GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket or something else. Right? And also the key thing is to replace these hard-coded values with variables, so that way I can make a change, like different regions, for example. Rather than having it hard-coded, I would have variables, so that way I can make one change at the top, and then it would carry forward for the rest of the script, and everybody can use it. The other pro tip I have in my experience here is to use this pushd and popd to temporarily go into a directory, so that way you're not assuming that you're always on the PWD or the present working directory, that you would have it, because otherwise then the script gets lost, and you have a lot of errors can happen in the running if you don't get your directories right. So always, print out where location that you have and so forth. Now this one here is a lab, and so what I did was in my, let me go to this file here. Yeah, so what I usually do is I would have a, there we go, come on, something happening to lost my mouse. Okay, well, forget that. Let me come in here then. Okay, my mouse. Okay, there we go. That ate my mouse. So here's an example.
You found your mouse.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, my cat. I blame it on the cat. So anyways, this stuff isn't hard. I mean, what I do is some of the examples here is that I have just like anything else, you start a code, and then you identify what the log out. So I log out to a file, so that way I can keep track of it. And then at the end, I would in the cleanup, I would find out how many blocks I have, how many actually files, how much data disk space I would consume during the run. And also how much time that it took. And so, you guys can come into this script here, this one here, and be able to, steal from it. But again, I wouldn't recommend that you actually run this until you really give it your review and see, what's going on. But anyway, so here are some of the ones, and I put in here some examples of headings that you would have. And one of the examples would be this guy right here is where you would copy this. And this is a standard Linux thing where you have the curl command, and basically it will download the script and then run it right away. Really kind of scary when I first looked at it. But one of the things, whenever you see this, I would recommend that you go to this script first, take a look at it and see what the heck it's doing before you actually go in there and, mess up your system. Okay. Also, too, I think it's helpful on the script to have a reference to the README for that particular script, so that there's some description on there. And then also, I, believe in giving credit where it's due. And if there is some reference to it, always put this, as part of the README, or this is part of the script. I would put this in here, some reference. So every transaction I do, I would say, okay, here's where you get some additional information on here. And people have found that to be, very helpful on there. So, this information on here. And also this has, I won't go into all of the stuff that you would do, but, just in terms of where you find it as I'm talking about it. Okay? So that's where that is. And then, and what I also did was I wrote a bash script description in my in Medium, so that way it gets people to understand it, and the description of where things are. I don't know if I have this in here. Yeah, this one here, Bash scripting using Google and Cloud Quick Labs. And the point is that I'm hoping to do is to create a community of people, you guys that are listening right now. So we can do these labs. So when we go into a quick lab, that I will have a directory or an entire library of each of the quick labs ones. So that way I can run it and I can make it my own, right? Because I've got variables in it. I've got everything I need in order to make it my own and not just have to rely on Quick Labs instructions to type out everything all the time. And by the way, if they have instructions in manual stuff, I use Selenium to run, and it will do those for me. And so the advantage here is I spend the time debugging things or debugging my thinking rather than debugging my typos. And so I found it very helpful. They haven't tried to call me and tell me to shut it down, but I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. But I think I get a good benefit for myself on it. So I would recommend that you guys to do this. Now there's still these scripts often going to have problems, right? And that's the reason why I need a community, is for several other people to help me and look at this. And I think that this is a good situation for society, so to speak, or the other people, because this Quick Lab provides a temporary environment that you can do all, you can blow it up if you want, and those scripts, no matter what happens, ain't going to kill you, right? And so that's why I think it's would be very helpful, is that you can learn based upon what they wanted you to do. I mean, a lot of people have thought very hard about how to have only a certain set of tasks for people to do on each of the different ones. So I think with this Quick Lab, as a performance person or a tester of any kind, I think it'll be very helpful. Again, it helps us ingratiate ourselves with the developers, at least to get some cred, because we can talk about this stuff as, okay, I know how to do this, right? And then so we're not, complete nincompoops, as some of them think we are. But we have to be really on par with them technologically to understand what it is, especially in this cloud environment, of what to do, right? They have this in English and Japanese, I think, here, or Chinese as well, which means that they've got a huge market for these things, and you can work internationally as well. So one of the things that I have done as well is, in this GitHub Bash coding stuff, I have put this whole all of my individual learnings about what to code, basically how to work with Linux. So if you go through all of this, you will be an effective Linux person to an extent, right? And the reason why I say it extent, because Macs, you look at this is only about Macs for now, but I also have other things in there, like Google Style Guides, and so forth, that you can have, that you can take a look at as well. But the reason why I caveat that is that there are aspects of the Mac commands that are different, because it's based on BSD rather than what Linus Torvalds wrote, that are different. And there's some, underlying issues, especially when you're talking about installation. Okay. So, but anyways, if you would like, take a look at this and be able to work with it. And one aspect I think that I wanted to mention here is that there's a thing called shell check that you can install that will then verify, lint basically, the bash scripts that you've created. And this one right here, the shell disable equals whatever, is saying I know that this is a problem and I am disabling this particular check, and so that way don't flag me in this. And I see this a lot in different places, and that's what this is. Whenever you see this kind of a code in bash scripts, you know that they're a little bit more professional, because they actually have linters working against that script. And every time you use a linter, you would probably need to have this kind of stuff, because you don't want to have errors showing up all the time and inure you to any errors that come up. Okay. All right. So this whole thing, I think, with having this reusable bash scripts are helpful. And here are some of the things in that article. And so I just wanted to mention this to you. You want to put comments in there, indicate progress in your script, and then check before doing things for item potency. So that means that anytime within my script, and again, we're talking about cloud environments here, so I can delete the whole instance and rerun it again. But every time, if I wanted to rerun it in the middle of this while I'm debugging, I should be able to run the script again, and it will automatically delete files that the script is already earlier created or downloaded. And so that way there's a process in there that anything before is deleted. So even though it's a new instance, I still want to delete things that the script has created just for the ability to rerun the script at any time and be able to do the testing, okay? So the other aspect of this, of using a script, important, is that then I can answer questions automatically. And that's one of the biggest challenges I think I had. There are things in there called an echo. You can echo a yes into the command, then pipe into the command. I can show you that in a minute. But the aspect of this is important, for you to include. So that way you don't have to pause the script for manual input. You can just, automatically, but there are some people, very many developers actually wrote automation scripts assuming that people will give it answers every single time. And I think that's really crazy. And that's part of the value that we provide as well, is to identify those kinds of situations and say, hey, go to the developer and says, hey, if there's a way for you to make this where you can look at a file rather than answering questions, it would really be helpful, because then that way it helps us test it automatically very, very easily. So also, save the manual console output, so that way you can show people that, hey, this was the response back, 2 months ago, and here's what I'm getting now, and, save those scripts in a GitLab or something. So now, in the earlier version, earlier presentation that we had, this was presented on here, and I don't have my notes. I forget who it was who had this. And so these are very much of a common situation here. So let me go through a few of these to show you some of the issues that we have here. Now, there are a number of different stacks that we have on here. One of them is the mean stack, which is the MongoDB Express and all that. So my thing here, what I've done with the script that I showed you earlier, is that I can install all of these in it, because I figured out, how to, mess with it, right? How to mess with the installation. So one of the things I wanted to show you on this aspect here, and let's see if I can get to it. Here we go. Is that here are the categories, and one is that by having a script outside of all this other stuff, one of the other capabilities that we have now is that I can specify or manage the ports, that even if I use Docker or whatever else, managing the ports, so that way we can see very easily that, find out which one are overlapping each other is a difficult thing. So this is really the beginnings of why I did this. But one of the things I found out is that rather than installing the server in my Mac, it was better for me to have all the servers run inside a Docker container. So that's my idea for you, or my suggestion, is that anytime you have a server, you have a different port, put it inside a Docker container, so that way you can manage it the way that it's supposed to, right? And rather than installing it on scratch and running it on your own situation, on your own machine, right? Now the question is, well, why do I need this? I have Brew running on my Mac, or we have apt-get, or anything else. The reason is sometimes you have a Brew error. Like, for example, you have an unset. Sometimes you need an unset, and I've had a couple of those situations where it is. Yeah. So basically, I am fixing. This is the ant here. So basically, I found this problem. This is an issue, in Homebrew. Hasn't been fixed. So because I had my script, I was able to add this in here very easily, and it would just take care of it, right? Whereas if I didn't have this, every time I install Ant, or anybody in my team installs Ant, it would be a problem. then they would have problems, right? And so that's the reason why I think this has been helpful in going through it in this particular approach, is to have a separate script that I depend on. The other issue is that there are, why it's helpful. Here, by the way, is an example of this push and pop, where I'm cloning something and coming in. Like, for example, this JUnit 5 that JMeter uses, that's hopefully we'll use in the future. I've got a way then of taking it, and then if it's already there, then I update it. I use these commands to update it automatically when it comes down. So the other part of it is installing these dependent components. So I may have different components that we have above and beyond what Maven or whatever has specified. I don't want to get into adding things in Maven. So what I do is, having the script, I can just work with it. And then also this, I can figure out the version numbers. And then also a lot of times, even though I run the package manager, it's supposed to mess with the bash profile, sometimes it doesn't. So what I ended up doing is to have to, on my own, be able to add things into the bash profile. So that way I can, for example, with this ant, for example, I would add this on here. They didn't add that when I work with it. So there's a lot of these paths that I add in here. So that way I can type the command in anywhere. The other part of this is adding some aliases as well. That's been very helpful. Like, for example, one of the things I have is a GSS here, which is instead of typing in git status all the time, I can just type in GSS. And so by having a script here, I automatically install all of these things that I don't forget about. So this would be included in my, anytime I have a new laptop, it would automatically build this in there for me. Okay, in there. What else? How much time do I have left?
Started with the delay, so I think you already almost have 5 or 10 minutes left.
Okay, all right. Let me go ahead and finish with this here.
But you're the last speaker, so you could just keep going.
It's only been 24 hours.
No, just don't ever end. Just keep going. That's fine.
Let's keep the party going, right? Okay. Woo-hoo! All right. Anyways, I don't know if all this is like old news to all of you, but I've pinned this to my wall here almost because this is, explaining that there are different package managers. So just because I have a script that uses brew doesn't mean that it'll work in Chocolatey. It doesn't mean that it's apt-get. And so a lot of this, for example, this AL2 here is the Amazon Linux 2 that they've gone out. Basically, I think they use a basis of Red Hat. And so that means that, if you're going to go to anything, if you want to use the Amazon, that is actually a local situation. What I can do now is to take this Amazon Linux 2 and put it onto local server. And that's the reason why they created it, is the same image that you can then put in and use Vagrant to run. And you can run a Linux instance using the same core that Amazon will use on their in the cloud. That's, again, if you're really into Amazon. So I would recommend that if you're going to get into Linux, that you might want to consider this, because I think this would make. They right now is still in beta, so you kind of keep eye on that. But then you would use the Yum package manager instead of apt-get or instead of brew. And by the way, this brew or brewcast is one of the annoyances with Mac, because the package manager, because when you figure out a application to install with brew, first you have to know whether it's a GUI application or whether it's a standard command line thing. And some people violate that. Like, for example, the Azure application, they have, the whole point of it is to provide a CLI, but then they have people go do brewcast in order to install it, which is kind of a pain. So again, having a script outside of this to do the installation would avoid this. I just put in to say, okay, install Azure CLI, and it will do it. And it will figure out whether it's brew or brewcast, and it'll do it for me. Okay. So we talked about that. And the other part is that the script has helped me is that it automatically works with these version managers. Like, for example, in Java, I would use this JENV, so that way I can have different versions of Java, and I can select, through a command, which version I want, because otherwise it becomes really a hassle, and especially with Python. I can use the Python ENV. I can have several different ones, and you guys use the NVM, know the value of that. And I have a whole blog page talking about this specific situation with how do you manage the different versions, and it's really a hot mess. All right. And so anyway, so these are other ones that are related to version managers. So my recommendation is try to use a version manager, but if you have a script to do the installation, you don't even have to think about it because it's already part of that whole process. Okay. Yeah, I think that would be enough. That one thing I want to end with this, okay, and without the notes is a little bit hard, but have you guys seen this? Remember that? Have you gone to the Belgium, the Grand Place, I think it's called? These are guild houses, right? And these existed because they were like guilds of, shoemakers and, whatever else. So
and chocolate, right? Belgian chocolate.
And chocolate. Right, yes, and chocolate makers.
And
so there's
smugglers.
like 40 different, there's 40 different ones of these, as I was told. But the reason why they don't have guilds anymore, and these are all like hotels now, right, or restaurants. And the reason why they don't have those anymore is because the government came in and had them like report, which is what we've got the patent system today, to say that, because these guys were fighting so much that the government had to step in and said, okay, we'll be the arbiter of who owns these secrets. So basically, they kind of gave it up. And so because the government became really the more, powerful. So the thing is, today we have a complete reversal of this patent system because of open source. And so we have a golden age, I think, of this. But I would put heads of each thing, because each of us now are basically our own guild, so to speak, right? But I would think that my hope is that, we can form alliances, that we can work with each other and, and help each other, so that way we can, do things and be able to, because there's so much technologies around here. We've really got to work together and help each other out without getting paid, right? And
no, I think that's true. And Joe Colantonio started the Perf Guild, so he already has a guild thing.
Right. But what I'm saying is more than just us sitting here together for 24 hours. I think that afterwards we need to do these kinds of, 13, 14 or more things with each other, with each other's book, right? And that's one of the things one biggest advice I have, because whenever I use a library, when I see a library, I would do these things. I'll say, hey, let me help you write a test case. Let me come up with a little tutorial I can explain to myself, and and if I see a typo, I do a PR, right? And all of that. And so that way, when I have a problem, when I email this guy who had this, he will answer me back, because he owes me, right? And that's really the currency in today's technical world, is that, we help each other out. And I would hope that, we would do more of that with each other. Okay. But anyway, so that's it. If you have any questions, I can take that.
So I don't know what happened. So I switched laptop because I disappeared from the conference suddenly. So I'm connected with Stefan now.
But you're back now.
Yeah, I'm back. But I was like trying to unmute myself, and then suddenly I discovered that I was not any part of the conference anymore.
No, you're not. But Zach's still with us.
Yes. Hey, how's it going?
Same thing happened to me. Yeah.
I'm still alive.
Yes.
So Wilson, let me ask you a question, because I was in a similar situation, having left sort of HP and Shunra, actually before then Microsoft, and all of the work that I had done has been really working in Microsoft shops. And in sort of 2012 or so, made the shift and worked for mainstream software development, super large tech company. Pretty much everyone was on Mac. Only a few people were on Windows boxes, and there really is sort of a religious bias between these two. And I have been a Linux guy for a really long time, just sort of in my spare time. Suddenly, boom, all my old Linux skills like polish the rust off, and away I went to business. Is that something you experienced as well?
Yeah, but there are caveats here. Like Microsoft came up with a bash on Windows. The trouble with that is it only accesses the storage and the hard drive that are within that bash instance. It won't go out there and reach Windows, right? And I don't know why, because the irony is that Microsoft was the one who created some of the formats that Linux uses. So ironic. But anyway, I think they may have done that, just so that way it's not a complete takeover of Windows. And the other part of this too that I wanted to mention is that in the Worldwide Developers Conference, in fact, yesterday, people were writing about the fact that, Macs are doomed. Apple is not going to support them anymore because they want things to be running on their Apple Cloud or, whatever else, and that they're not going to put touch screens on the Macs, and that they're not going to integrate the whole touchscreens on the iOS into the Mac because it would just maybe too difficult or something. So I can imagine that it would go the way of what Microsoft did, which was basically says, okay, we're not going to have the Mac. We're just going to have very good iOS devices, so convert these phones, and that's what you'll use. And if you want something more powerful, then you go on to the to the web, where, or the clouds to do your work, with GPUs and all of that. So I think that's probably not a, unimaginable situation is for that to occur. But for now, it's good because, the Mac's got 16 gigs of memory, and usually most Windows don't have that much, right? And because, you're paying $3,000 anyway, you might as well get 16 gigs, right? That's helped because I can run.
The other thing that strikes me in your discussion, and that I experienced as well, is just sort of this ubiquity of I need a tool, and the tool is there, and I can install it, and it's the first byte is free. There's sort of the open source piece, and then you're like, here's the open source version, and it does some of the things that are really cool, and then you find out the commercial version is the upgrade from there. There's a lot of people that are working around all of those limitations that are like, the free version of this and the free version of that and the free version of this and the free version of that. I put those three together, I'm good to go. The sort of ease of use seems to be a big thing compared to some of the older shops I remember that were like, well, you're on a Microsoft kernel, you have to buy the license, and you got to wait for procurement to come together with the license, and that takes time, and then what's the ROI statement? Suddenly you're like, why? I just want to write my freaking code, man. Just let me finish my freaking code. I don't want to make an ROI statement to the CFO of the thing. I think they were onto something in this separation there. Is that something you witnessed as well?
Well, by the way, the reason why I put the script together was because at the place that I was at, they were having some kind of a hissy fit with each other at these teams. It says, no, Ansible is the way to go. Another team goes, no, you got to write things with Puppet. And so I was going, all right, forget it, guys. I'm going to be doing my own. I'll write my own script. I'm not using any of these tools that you're fighting about. That's what came about. It's because of that, listening contest that these guys are doing, which is really unproductive.
Yeah. Isn't Ansible just like a fancy SCP utility?
Right.
So, because I've been evaluating.
The advantage of Ansible is that unlike Puppet and unlike what's the other one, Chef, you need to have agents sitting on the server. Whereas with Ansible, it would just use the SSH to connect, and it's got some background too. It's like if it doesn't, you'll use like SCP, and it will fall back, to these different ones. But you do have to create a SSH keygen, that you'll have to do with Git anyway on GitHub.
Yep.
That you would create, and it uses those same features on there. But yeah, it's basically as a structure for it, and a lot of people have written modules, plugins for them to do installation of various aspects. So I think what I'm going to do is to work with Wisdom Humbola, which is one who taught me everything I knew about Bash. I'd like to work with him to come up with an Ansible approach to this Windows. I do have some of it already, but I'd like to, work with the community to get more, get the rest of it. So that way you can use a good structure and be able to have various people contribute little bits of it. Because right now it's just one huge 6,000 line thing, and it's not maintainable, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever used Terraform? Do you have any experience with that?
I think Terraform's great. The nice thing about Terraform is that just like serverless, it allows you to write a code for Azure, for Google, and also for local machines, right? Because I think there's a lot of cases where you want to have something running on a local with OpenShift, I think, and OpenStack, to be able to run things locally. I think that any technology would be important. Like, for example, my recommendation for databases on the cloud would be, instead of using Amazon's DynamoDB, use like MySQL or anything else. So that way you're not stuck with one particular cloud vendor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And
so I think generic Postgres even.
Yeah, or anything, on there, anything but DynamoDB. But the ironic thing, the unfortunate thing, is that DynamoDB is the number one technology according to some, I think it was Stack Overflow or somebody's, or I think maybe Glassdoor or one of these recruiting companies. So that's like the number one skill that they're looking for, and I'm going like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So historically, I've been a Linux guy, and recently I switched to Mac, and it's been kind of our lights just went out. It's been kind of a big.
Wave your hands, man.
Well, it's in the other.
Government's after you.
See?
Yeah, so I really like using MobaX term. Have you guys ever used MobaX?
Yeah.
It's a Windows utility, but I can't use it on Mac. So I was thinking we could build a Docker container, containerize it.
Yep. Yeah, you can run your Docker container local and then just jump through that.
Yeah. So
what you can do is that you can do a dual boot on your Windows, on your machine, because if you get like a terabyte, then you could have a dual boot on Windows. You have dual boot into Windows on your Mac, and there's a couple of I think Parallels was one that has that. I love Fusion, VMware Fusion. It is incredible. I mean, I crash less on my Windows instance on my Fusion than I do on my regular Windows machine.
Yeah, because it's stable, consistent virtual hardware versus weird, we don't know what's happening, real hardware.
Yeah.
Real hardware. I worked at Microsoft for 6 years. Real hardware is a challenge for those guys. Real drivers is a challenge. Absolutely.
That's true.
So, Wilson, this is really great, not just culturally, but even technically how you're dealing with this. It was good.
Yeah, I'm struggling along with everyone. So anyway, I look forward to working with you guys again. So let me know if there's anything I can do for you.